I am a 92-year-old German-born Jew who grew up in the Hitler Youth and was forced to fight in WW2 in the German Antitank division. I deserted and became a POW in a British camp and eventually moved to Canada in 1955. Just recently, I published a memoir of my life. AMA. Did your German background make it any more difficult to obtain a job after moving to Canada? I was told by immigration, a Jewish Czech lady, to say I was Austrian or Swiss because openly saying I was German would make it impossible for me to get a job. There was a lot of prejudice against German people at that time regardless of their thoughts on the war. What was your reaction when the war ended and the Holocaust evidence surfaced? Did you hear any stories about the concentration camps while you were fighting? Right from the beginning of Hitler's power, concentration camps were being built. We knew because our neighbors were arrested for being communist. They returned a year later and secretly told us what they had learned. We always had an idea of what was going on. From what I understand, the Nazi German state had a pretty intense propaganda campaign. What are some things that you later found out the state had lied about? Is there anything that you believe only the Nazi state has told the truth about? We listened to BBC One radio from London and Moscow secretly. If we were caught, we would get charged with high treason, so we always knew what was real news. I was also in the resistance. We shared this information from BBC One with anyone we could through posters during blackout, at night. Were there instances where you were close to being exposed as Jewish? Did you meet anyone else who was in the same situation? A family friend who knew I was Jewish was not a loyal fascist but opportunistically blackmailed my parents because they had money goods from smuggling. Aside from that, we were not close to any loyal fascists and I was a very convincing liar. I was in the resistance with another guy whose father was also Jewish. Unfortunately, he ended up in a concentration camp. Thank you for this AMA. How did you and the other soldiers interested in deserting identify one another? I know the Nazis and other totalitarian governments depend upon dissidents not being able to find one another. We spent a lot of time together in a field hospital. We were all injured and got to know each other quite well. We swapped stories of what had happened to us during the Nazi reign. The 3 others I deserted with were all German Polish descent, so they were forcefully taken from Poland to join the German army. Did you know Franz Stigler? Also, what was it like in Nazi Germany? No, I did not. Nazi Germany was fine for anyone who followed what the Nazis wanted. You were quite well off actually. However, if you did not blindly follow, you ended up on the sheet list and lived a much more difficult life. You seem to have held a number of different jobs. As someone who's nearly 30, I find it difficult to know what I want to do. Does that feeling ever go away? Is there any job that you have held that you really enjoyed, and what was your least favorite job role you have had? Reforestation was my favorite job because I was doing something good and it was peaceful. My least favorite job was working 25 years in wood fiber because I had no other choice and it was very mindless work. That being said, the money was good and it put food on the table for my family. Also, it gave me a good pension. My dream job would have been becoming an independent candy maker like my father, but that was not an option for me. Wow. You have led a full life. At 92, what are your goals for the future? Right now I'm learning how to use the internet and writing a book of short stories from my life that didn't make it into the memoir. How was life once the British got you? Any mistreatment? How long were you in prison and what was the atmosphere within others POWs there? First of all, we were treated amazingly well by the British. When we deserted, the first thing they offered us was a cup of tea and Woodbine cigarette. The fellow who took me prisoner was 19 years old from Liverpool and showed me his family pictures and told me the war was over for me. In the camp itself, food was scarce, even for the British, but they were fair and did their best. I was in the camp for 7 months. I had a good relationship with other POWs. On my 18th birthday, they all banded together to get me an extra ration of bread, took small bits of tobacco they had to make me a cigar, and one, with the help of a guard, got me a blooming thistle in the no man's land between fences keeping us in the camp. Can you tell us more about your time with the Anti-Tank division? What was it like? We were trained to have 2 bazookas on our backs and 1 in our hands. We were trained to elbow crawl through enemy lines and destroy as many tanks as possible at night time. I was going to be deployed on what was essentially a suicide mission, so I intentionally smashed my foot with a boulder so I would be sent to a field hospital instead. My parents lived in Holland during the occupation, and had vivid memories of the time. How did the average German feel about occupying their neighbors at that time? Opinions were mixed. My family felt very bad because of my connections to the Netherlands. My Oma was from Gelderland. I think the majority of Germans, at least Western Germans, felt that the Dutch were our friends. We shared many traditions and culture, so there was much sympathy over German occupation. What was the reaction of German officials to youth who did not want to participate in the Hitler Youth? Everyone had to go, no questions. Officials would go after your parents and they would go through heavy questioning. If you or your parents questioned Nazi reign in any way, they would disappear. The propaganda was so powerful for some youth that parents were afraid of their own children. Many children raised in the Hitler Youth turned in their parents for not being faithful to the Nazi party. Thank you for sharing your story with us. What was it like being in the Hitler Jugend? In school they tell you some things, but I would be very interested in hearing your experience. I felt like the only one who knew the truth but couldn't speak because they were pushing the idea of the super race and antisemitism. Aside from the propaganda, they taught us many useful life skills. For example, Morse code, which I can still use today. I enjoyed the sports, camping, survival training, and whatnot. It was kind of like Boy Scouts, but with a propaganda agenda. Historical documentaries always show Hitler as an immensely popular figure in Germany at the time. Was the average German really as fanatical about the Reich as depicted, or was it more a political uprising brought on by those with power and money? The industrialists, big business guys, sided with Hitler because they were scared of communism, which would destroy their businesses. The Christian churches also sided with Hitler because communism was a common enemy. The poor and unemployed approved of Hitler because he created policies that gave them food and other basic necessities in a dark time, the Depression. Youth who were brought up in the Hitler Youth propaganda were fanatical. They were empowered by the Nazi state and repressed those who were less than absolutely supportive of fascism. Many older people, above school age, were a little or critical of the Nazi state, but of course you had to be quiet about this. Many Germans were very bitter about the Treaty of Versailles, so Hitler was also a good channel for that anger. Some people were supportive of Hitler's desire to promote Germany until the war became reality. Do you have any connections to Germany today? Was it a tough decision to emigrate? Do you have any opinions on the state of Germany today? I have visited Germany quite often and have family there. Leaving was not easy, money was tight, but I have always felt more at home in Canadian culture. Germany is a great country and I'm happy that most of the hatred is gone. I like that there were no difficulties crossing borders when traveling thanks to the EU. Germany has outstanding culture. Thank you for sharing your experiences. What was your opinion of other Germans during and after the war? How did you see your neighbors given everything you learned in your life? The majority of people were frightened and sad during the war. They were people I had known my whole life, so they did not change drastically, only as much as they needed to survive. It became well known that a lot of people had been misled by German propaganda about Germany having an excellent standard of living compared to others at the beginning of the war. After the war, people had more freedom of speech. Many were still very patriotic but rejected Nazi reign. They had kind of turned a blind eye. So to summarize, people didn't change, only how vocal they were changed. What is the worst thing you have seen? BTW. My great-grandfather is a 96-year-old Holocaust survivor. I'm going to tell him your story, I think he would love it. He always says that the Jewish spirit cannot be broken. Your story shows it really well. Concentration camp inmates coming into the area we were stationed as part of the anti-aircraft division. They were brought in to dig ditches for ADOC cables. They looked like the living dead. I saw them jump into the garbage bins to eat rotten potato peels. I was able to get food for them from our kitchen. I'm not religious anymore, but I absolutely agree that the Jewish spirit gave, and continues to give, me strength. I would also like to hear your great-grandfather's story. Feel free to message me. Have you ever been back to Germany, the Ruhrgebiet in particular? If so, what are your thoughts on the changes that have happened since? Political, economical, society in general. Greetings from a neighboring city of Herne. I have been back. The standard of living impressed me. The progress they have made is awesome. Unfortunately, due to the dense population, things cannot be as peaceful as it is in Canada. I definitely notice that German people can be fearful of others compared to my experience in Canada. For example, talking to a stranger on the street. I returned to the secret family business of smuggling. So your Jewish family was part of organized crime before the war? My Oma smuggled out of necessity during WW1. German people did not have access to things like stockings, coffee, tea, tobacco, perfumes, spices, etc. due to tariffs and sanctions on goods coming from surrounding countries. We traded schnapps for American cigarettes with the Allies. It was less major organized crime than an illegitimate family business. Many people in the community knew about us and would come to buy goods from us. My family was always generous with the community and tried to give back. For example, my father always donated candy to orphans at Christmas. We did not smuggle to become rich, rather to survive in a severely depressed economy.